This is Dateline News and Conversation. If you aren't angry, if you aren't really angry at what's going on with this genocide in Israel, if you are not sympathetic to the thousands of students on hundreds of university campuses around the USA who are protesting against Israel in this genocide and their government for supporting Israel, you need a wake up call. I am beyond angry. And I'm not, the government in the United States is not my government. It does not represent me or anybody else in the United States. I'm going to go off on this tonight with my good friend, Bruce Gagnon, who's in Maine. We're not only going to talk about this, we're going to talk about what's going on in Ukraine, and then we're going to talk about something Bruce is a international expert on, the space race. Bruce, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Regis. Good to be
All
with
right.
you.
I'm throwing this wide open to you. You are in the States. You have been following this issue since it began on October 7th. But I don't want to go back and cover any of that. The genocide that Israel is conducting in Palestine is, I think, unprecedented in human history for a number of reasons. It is obscenely violent, and it's been broadcast on television and covered in the news. We've seen the pictures of children who were shot in the head by IDF soldiers who were just having target practice. We've seen the demolition of Palestinian houses, apartment blocks, businesses, schools, and hospitals. Nothing more grotesque. So before we talk about the protest, Bruce, tell me what your thoughts are on this ongoing genocide and the support of the United States government of this genocide and this illegal state of Israel.
Well, I'm suffering in my own way, as my wife Mary Beth is as well, and many of my dear friends, as we watch all of this underway. We're regularly out in the street. We're online, doing everything we can online to share information. But I've come to the conclusion, as many have, that the U.S. government is fully under the control of the Zionists through AIPAC, the American Israeli Political Action Committee in the United States, which when somebody gets elected to Congress, AIPAC shows up at their office, lays down a piece of paper, and says, sign this, that you will always support Israel. And if you don't, we're going to take you out in the next election. We're going to fund people to run against you in the primary of your party. And if you still win that and you're in the general election, we're going to support the other side. And so that's the way it works. And that's why we see Democrats fully supporting, along with the Republicans, fully supporting Israel today. So I think the attacks on the students, it's a chorus, it's a script that all the media, all the politicians, all the police departments all over the country, they're all following the same script, saying that the peaceful student protests at these colleges and universities across the country are anti-Semitic. And then that is a huge distraction from what's going on in Gaza, what's going on now in Rafah, where they're bombing Rafah, even though they say that Israel says that they haven't started their onslaught yet. They have, and they're using bombs. So anyway, let me run through a little bit just to give a bit of flavor from the last 24 hours, what I've seen, watching videos from around the country from various universities. At Indiana University, the police attacked the students. They arrested many. And the students talked about the police putting shooters on the roofs of buildings, and they were escorted. The students have pictures of administration, college campus administrators, escorting the shooters, the cop shooters, to the roofs of buildings. That's in Indiana University. At the University of South Florida in Tampa, just yesterday, police attacked the nonviolent, peaceful encampment with tear gas and were firing rubber bullets at them. At UCLA, which has been going through hell, the students there, nonviolent, have been attacked 2 times by up to 1,000 Zionists at a time. We're told that Los Angeles has the largest Israeli Zionist population in the country, Jewish population in the country. And so they've been rounding them up, sending them to attack UCLA. And just last night at midnight, Zionists attacked for the second time. And they were throwing bottles, throwing sticks, attacking the barricades that the students had erected around their camp, taking their sound systems, stealing them, beating people up. And the police arrived after about an hour of this, but this attack went on for 2 hours. And when the police came, they just stood there and watched for well over an hour as the Zionists continued this attack in front of the cops. And then after that time, after they figured the Zionists had done enough damage, the police went in and separated the so-called warring sides. But the war was only coming from the Zionist side. At Columbia University, just last night, my wife and I were watching it till late in the night. The police raided the hall, Hamilton Hall, that had been renamed for a young Palestinian girl who had been killed. Now, this Hamilton Hall in 1968 was the site of anti-Vietnam War occupation. And then during the South Africa liberation, the divestment campaigns against apartheid South Africa in the late 70s and early 80s, the same Hamilton Hall was again occupied by the students and used as a site to protest against apartheid South Africa. So this is now the 3rd time that Hamilton Hall has been occupied by students in the history of Columbia University. But this time it's different because the police went in there last night with unbelievable force and attacked the students, arrested about 300 people, 279 to 300 some students that were from both Columbia and the City College of New York. Now, previously, when the students occupied during the South Africa apartheid campaign, the Democrats in America were in favor of them. They supported them. They were very outspoken in favor of stopping the apartheid system in South Africa, particularly Black Democrats. But now these days, these same, even Black Democrats are supporting Israel. They're supporting the Zionists. And why is that? Again, because they've been threatened by the Zionists. Now, Brown University in Rhode Island, one of the elite Ivy League schools, they just closed their camp today because they said the board of trustees had agreed that they would discuss the demands of the camp to divest from Israeli war production, but they would wait till next fall, next October, before they would discuss it. They didn't say they would divest their financial holdings in Israeli corporations. They just said they would discuss it. And those students backed down, surrendered essentially, claimed victory, but they've now closed their camp. Jill Stein, you probably heard, she's the Green Party candidate for president of the United States. She went to Columbia earlier in the week, Columbia University, to stand with the students there. And then she went on to St. Louis, Missouri, to Washington University, where she joined a line of students and spoke on behalf of the students. They asked her to speak to the media and to the police who were lined up against them. And what did the police do after Jill Stein called for restraint and understanding that this peaceful protest was very democratic, followed in the best traditions of American free speech and free assembly? The police attacked with bicycles, picked up bicycles and rushed the student line, including Jill Stein, who was entangled in this bicycle, the police pushing on her, arrested her, threw to the ground one of our main friends, who's one of Jill Stein's campaign workers now, threw her on the ground. She's lucky she didn't get a broken neck from this whole process. So that was Washington University. So it's really clear to me that if this continues, somebody's going to get killed. It's going to be like Kent State during the Vietnam War in Ohio, where the National Guard went in and started shooting and killed students. Last night, when the cops went into Hamilton Hall there at Columbia, they were armed with everything you can imagine. And I'm just thinking, oh my God, these guys start shooting, somebody's going to be dead. So this is how serious it's getting. But again, I must come back to this point. Why is the United States reacting in this way? And clearly, it is because Netanyahu and the Israelis are desperate. The Israeli internal political situation is in upheaval right now. And as the families and supporters of the prisoners who are being held inside of Gaza, they're demanding that the war stop so these people can be released. The Israeli government, backed by the right-wing part of the government, is declining to do that. And so their government is in disarray. And so they're feeling desperate. The United States is feeling desperate that their war project there in Gaza, that U.S. is funding and arming. Clearly, the U.S. supports the genocide against the Palestinian people. U.S. is worried that the American people are turning against them. So they have to demonize the students by calling them anti-Semitic, even there's no evidence of it. And the faculty have come out at Columbia University. They came out with vests on, red vests, lined up protecting the student encampment 2 days ago, and said there's no anti-Semitism going on here from these students. It's all being made up by the corporate media, which is also controlled by the Zionist AIPAC lobby. So this is where we are in America right now. The students have really put American politics in crisis over this situation.
Wow, you've made too many points that I'd like to dig deeper into each of them, but I'll focus on a couple. I am beyond anger at what the government and the individual states and universities are allowing to happen on all of those campuses across the country. It's well over 100 now. I've seen videos of the obscene violence and brutality of police on innocent protesters, kids who are nonviolent. There's only one word for this, Bruce. America is and has been for a long time a fascist company, organization, government.
Yeah.
To be able to do this to our own citizens it's beyond my ability to understand how the majority of the American people can stand by and tolerate this. And this has been going on for decades, Bruce, as you and I both know. The vast majority of educated, well-to-do Americans are scared shitless to speak out because they're afraid of being socially isolated. They're afraid of losing their jobs. They're just afraid. And because this gutless reaction or non-action, they have been watching their country and their government disintegrate right before their eyes. And as I said, it's beyond my understanding. I don't know how ordinary Americans can stand by and take this again. And I'm talking about people that are in their 50s, 60s, who remember Vietnam, who remember Kent State, who remember and were participants in Occupy, when that damn Obama, the worst criminal, two-faced president we've ever had, over one weekend shut down Occupy violently all across the country. I just can't understand how Americans can let this happen. And Bruce, what you didn't mention is these protests against the genocide, not protests, but enormous, by the millions and tens of thousands of people around the world standing up for Palestine. But in America, it's just our students, which I think is hopeful, which I really do think is great. We got to do everything we can to support them. But it's people around the world who now have seen the obscene behavior of Israel and the sugar daddy, the United States. One last comment before I ask you another question.
Well,
what is happening?
Let me just correct you. It's not just students. There are a lot of people my age and between my age and student age that are out in the street all over the country, protesting, marching, doing many different things. But it's true that there are not enough of us. There needs to be a lot more of us, especially right now as these students are being attacked. So this is an important point. Let me just say finally on this that as far as I'm concerned, the Democrats have screwed themselves. They have totally lost an entire generation of young people. They're going to really suffer in the election in November. Even if everybody says, oh, we can't have Trump, we can't have Trump. I think Jill Stein's campaign has just picked up several percentage points after them arresting her. It's been all over a lot of media around the world, actually. And I can tell you what, students that are protesting are very aware that Jill Stein, running for president, got arrested supporting them. They're not going to forget that come election day.
Yeah, well, you and I both personally know Jill Stein from our events with her in the past. And, you know, I'm totally disconnected from these electoral cycles in the United States. I got fooled for the last time with Obama the first time around. I'll never be fooled again. But if anybody should or could lead this country in a different direction, it's not Kennedy, because he's totally pro-Israel. It's Jill Stein, who, by the way, I believe is a Jewish person herself.
Yeah.
Now, I wanted to finish, and maybe we're not finished with this, but I wanted to say, you made the distinction that these are Zionists. This is not Judaism. This is Zionism. And what's happening, and I had this discussion, incredibly in-depth discussion on Tuesday with my good friend Sylvia Demarest, dispelling the myth of anti-Semitism and victimism or victimization. It's becoming clear now because there are so many Jews, biblical Jews, who are in the streets protesting as well, putting their bodies on the line. And I think this is one of the most important things, is this myth of anti-Semitism that's being used to harm, disable, to render us impotent, because anything we say about what's happening is anti-Semitic, which is bullshit. And they need to be called out. And you did a good job of that. I want to ask you a couple more questions. Bruce, George Soros reportedly gave money to the student protest. What do you make of that? Because you and I both know who he is and what he's been doing in the United States with social movements and around the world. What's your take on what that money means? Whoa.
Can't speak very authoritatively about it, but I did see it several different places with people that I respect reporting it. But in the end, I would say the important point is that we know that George Soros has long been the color revolution big daddy funder. And so the question we have to ask is, are they trying to create a color revolution here in this country? Are they trying to create civil war in this country, like they did in Ukraine, like they're now working on in the country of Georgia, like they did in many other places around the world? And Soros has been involved in most of them. So yeah, I think that there's something going on here. We also know that Black Lives Matter was funded by some some of these same kind of funders like Soros. So I do think they're trying. It's not that they care about the students. It's not they care about Black people or Black people's issues. I think they're trying to create the division between the so-called conservatives or more rural people and the so-called progressive, or the liberals, as they like to say in the media, and pit them against each other. And by saying that Soros is funding these students, then they can begin to build this, the right wing versus the left wing kind of thing. And I think that's what they're pushing. They know that America is declining. They're going to take us down. Our economy is collapsing, and it's going to get a lot worse. And they don't want us to pit that on Wall Street, on the big industrialists, all right, the banksters, the military-industrial complex, the Congress, who's been bought out by all these interests. They don't want us to focus on them. They want us to focus on each other, the right versus the left, all that kind of thing, and fight each other, kill each other even. This whole thing last night at UCLA with the Zionists attacking the students. To me, that's the coming narrative that they want to create. There's a good guy and a bad guy. And the students, they're part of the Muslims. They're part of the Arabs. They're part of the Intifada. They're the enemy. They've invaded the country. We've got to take them out. So I think this is the narrative that they're trying to create. And Soros, I'm sure, is in the middle of it.
Well, I agree with you wholeheartedly. The one thing that I'm kind of pleased about is they haven't tried to pin this on Russia yet. Yeah, I'm scratching my head over that one. This would be classic. Russia is behind this.
Yeah.
Couple more things before we move on. I'd like you to verify this if you can, because I only saw one post that facial recognition, artificial intelligence, is being used to identify who these protesters are, primarily the students. And what they're doing is they're threatening students that if we find out who you are, you will be expelled from school, you'll never get a degree from here, and this will follow you throughout your life. You'll never get a job. You'll be totally isolated, excommunicated from society. Do you have any thoughts on that, Bruce? Can you confirm that?
Yeah, I've seen that too. And this is one of the primary reasons why so many students are still wearing masks. It's not so much that they're worried about COVID, it's they're trying to make it harder to be identified. because this is the major fear threat that the media and the politicians are using against the students. Big donors, a lot of times who are Zionists themselves, to these colleges like Columbia and others, they're threatening the schools that when you arrest these people and you need to suspend them, and we're going to ban them. We're going to get them banned from getting jobs in the corporate world in the future. I'm sure, without a doubt, I'm sure that this is keeping tens of thousands of students who feel in their heart connected to these encampments. It's keeping them away because they have that fear. They got a call from mom and dad saying, you better not get involved in that stuff. We're paying for your college education. And if you get involved in that, don't you even bother to come home. My God. So I think this is another strategy they're using to try to limit the success of these protests. But remarkably and courageously, many of these students, after their camp has been attacked by the cops and cleared out, destroyed. I saw one police vehicle run over a bunch of the gear of the students at one camp. I forgot where it was. I watched so many of them, but anyway, they just have no regard for anything. Anyway, they're trying to frighten people away. But in spite of that, many students return again, reset their camp up, and go at it again. So it's an amazing thing.
Yeah, I want to focus on something else that has really pissed me off for a long time. It's the universities and colleges across the United States, almost to a one, have been accepting money from the Defense Department, the War Department, let's call it what it is, to do special projects, special research. They're all dependent on billions of dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars to continue that research. The University of Maine, as you and I both know, had a huge secret facility built on campus. Top secret. They don't know what's going on in there. Now, universities across the country have not been standing behind, most of them. A few have. The Columbia University professors, I believe it was, surrounded the students, kept the police away. But most universities are threatening the students. And why are they doing that? Bruce, you and I both know. Billions and billions of dollars are being spent to co-opt and corrupt the universities and their presidents and their boards. And in terms of the individual professors, they suffer the same fear. They need grant money to continue their work, to continue their research, no matter what it's in. That all comes from the United States government, or it comes directly from Zionist IPAC. And so they're threatened. They're fearful that if they get involved in this and they support the students, they lose their jobs. What an indictment of our educational system that really was supposed to be on the vanguard of instilling in young people the ability to think critically, the ability to dissect the narrative and be able to understand the lies and bullshit that are being unloaded on all of us. I wanted to say that before we finished on this thing, but you mentioned something about Israel itself. The illegal state of Israel, by the way, is in upheaval. I saw videos the last couple of days, massive protests going on all over Israel, in Jerusalem, in Tel Aviv. And they're not just young people. They're protesting against Netanyahu, and they're protesting against this genocide. I know it's been reported that most Israelis are in favor of the genocide, but there are obviously a significant enough number of people who are protesting against the government and its actions. The other thing about Israel that has not been clearly articulated, and certainly not enough, their economy is in shambles. It started when they called up all their reserves who are all in companies and businesses and government in Israel. So that means work is not being done, production is not happening. In addition to that, the Houthis first started bombing, shelling ships coming into the Red Sea. And now basically transportation of anything going to Israel has been blocked. Half of their port workers have been laid off. And then on top of that, Bruce, the BDS movement, it's all over the world. People are banning the importation and the purchase of anything made in Israel. What are your thoughts, Bruce, when you look at what's happening politically and economically in Israel? Do you think that government, that country, can survive much longer? And add to that the isolation now from most of the rest of the planet.
Well, I think Israel has so many obvious contradictions that it's going to be damn near impossible for them to recover from this episode. And let's face it, they're not done yet. They don't seem to be deterred at the least. And as many people have said, the United States could stop them if they pulled the plug on the funding, if they told them no. But they're not gonna. Again, because of what we've already talked about 10 times, AIPAC's control of our government here in the US. So I think that Israel's going to lose, quote unquote, lose this war. They're not going to eliminate Hamas. They can't eliminate Hezbollah. They can't stop the Houthis. Their economy, as you said, is collapsing because of all this stuff. Just as our economy is collapsing because of all of our spending on wars, endless wars, and supporting Israel's war, supporting Ukraine's war, proxy war against Russia. Anyway, I just want to say this. Mussolini, the World War II Italian fascist leader, defined fascism as the wedding of corporations and government. Well, that's what we have in the United States. Our government is controlled by the corporate elite, by Wall Street, the military-industrial complex, big oil, etc. And that means, by that definition, that we have a fascist state. And in a fascist state, you're going to see the boots on the ground, the gendarmes beating the hell out of people that stand up and protest against government policies. We're seeing it today with the students. And you're going to see increasing cutbacks in social spending, just like in Argentina, this fascist leader they got there in the last election. He's cutting social spending like crazy. People increasingly on the streets. He doesn't give a damn. He's a brutal fascist leader. He says he wants to turn their Argentinian money system into the dollar, which is a collapsing, money instrument. And that's not a very smart idea on his part. But, there are these fascists around the world that are really moving strong. Germany is led by a fascist government now. United Kingdom is led by a fascist government now. Most of the NATO countries are led by fascist governments, where corporations control the political process. So that's the biggest danger we face today, is fascism growing across the world.
I have to agree with you. I've been talking about that with others as well. You just have to look at the actions of those governments that you pointed out. I mean, from Great Britain, UK, to France, to Germany. You got even into the Scandinavian countries now that have gone completely fascist. It's unbelievable how in such a short period of time, they've gone from neutral countries, supposedly, to all-out fascists, putting down.
Let me say something about that. In Sweden, you know who the former ambassador of Sweden was during the Obama administration? Zbigniew Brzezinski's son. He was the ambassador to Sweden. And my friends there told me repeatedly how he was pressuring the Swedish government to get under the umbrella, if you will, of the US war fighting regime. And he was successful in doing that. So the United States has flooded their ambassadorships, has flooded the governments of these countries with graduates from Harvard and Yale that likely are connected to the CIA. They become president or prime minister of their government in these EU countries, and they then bring their country into the US warfighting system. This is what's going on today. The United States has had a big plan that they've been implementing for many years to turn Europe into a puppet against Russia and China. And they've successfully pulled it off. And it's destroying those countries. The sanctions against Russia have blown back on Europe. And now the United States is threatening sanctions against China, if you can believe it. And that's going to blow back on Europe as well. And so all of these decisions are just absolutely sick, but it's a sign of a desperate collapsing empire led by the United States and the UK, the junior partner in this whole episode.
I want to add to what you've been saying about the United States' use of hard but soft power for decades and decades. And there's that money from USAID and the State Department, billions and billions of dollars over the last several decades. I've seen it in the former Soviet republics of Armenia and Abkhazia, American universities, United States universities, all kinds of government NGOs that are funded by USAID. They're in these countries and they've been there for decades, pouring billions of dollars into the same thing you said about Europe, identifying people, bringing them to the United States, Harvard, Yale, Ivy League colleges, Stanford, and they groom them to go back and assume positions. So it's not just Western Europe, it's Eastern Europe as well. And it's pernicious. Now, you mentioned financial collapse. I wanted to talk about that with you, Bruce, because when I mention this to people here, and I'm in the Russian Federation, I'm in Crimea, and I talk to my Russian friends and say the United States is in economic, social, cultural, and moral free fall. They cannot believe it. Bruce, pick up on this topic. The leading economist around the world and in the United States, Jamie Dimon, the CEO of whatever it is, JP Morgan, and other CEOs of major banks in the United States have been saying the red lights are going off all over the place. Bruce, from your perspective, sitting there in Maine, tell me about what's happening from your perspective with the United States economy and how it's affecting Americans in the pocketbook.
Right now, the United States has $35 trillion of debt. That's with a T, trillion dollars in debt. This debt will, for the next 7 generations, our children and grandchildren and those that follow them will be paying off this debt for the next 7 generations. It's absolutely terrible. And that's largely come because of all these endless wars that continue and continue and continue. At the same time, just the other day, I was driving in the car listening to the local radio station, and they were talking about all the problems in our school system here in the state of Maine. Teachers are being laid off, cafeteria workers are being laid off. The schools are in big trouble. They don't have any money. The state doesn't have the money to give the schools. Used to be money came from the federal government for schools. That money is drying up. And so if you live in a rich part of town, your school's likely in better shape. But working class and poor people, your schools are collapsing at the seams. And this is intentional because they want to create a divide between the rich and everybody else in America. This is the goal. And those on the bottom are not going to have good education. They're not going to have good job training. They're not going to have jobs. But the rich, they'll be protected by the military, by the fascist state. BRICS, I just learned this today, but right before I came on the air here with you, that central banks around the world are dumping their dollars. They've stopped buying U.S. Treasury bonds, and instead they're buying gold because the dollar is weak as a result of this debt. And even Iraq, if you can believe it, has sold all of their dollars, and they're dumping the dollar, and they're trying to get the U.S. bases out of their country, just like Niger is trying to get the U.S. bases out of their country. And the U.S. is slow walking. Well, we're not sure. We're studying it, and everything else. U.S. doesn't want to get out of these countries because it's how they've dominated them for many years. But how much longer can the U.S. afford to stay with 800 bases around the world? So this debt crisis is going to collapse the military machine around the world for the U.S. So these are the real essential elements of this economic collapse. People are paying rents for just, one-room apartment in my town today is well over $1,000 a month. It's absolutely insane. People can't afford it anymore. So imagine if you have a bigger house. Imagine trying to heat your house at the cost of heating fuel these days going up like crazy. And especially in a cold state like Maine, people are really hurting. But the problem is, as you earlier said so well, everybody's job scared. They're afraid that if they get out on the street, if they complain publicly, even if they write a letter to the editor to complain about any of this stuff, they're going to get demonized. They're going to get questioned at work. They might lose their job. So people are afraid. They're quiet. But it's the wrong time to be afraid and quiet. We need to be bold. We need to be courageous. We need to stand up and speak, not only for ourselves, but we need to speak for the next 7 generations, because they're going to go through living hell the way things are going in this country. People need to get out now and speak up before it's too late. Show some damn courage.
All right, Bruce, you're living in Maine. That was my last residence a little over 4 years ago. How much does gas cost now?
It's around $3.60 or 70 cents a gallon. Other states, some are cheaper. My wife and I, she just retired, and at Christmas time we took a 1,000. Oh gosh, it was more than 1,000. It was a couple 1,000-mile trip across the country to visit friends and relatives for Christmas, and so we saw a lot of fluctuation in gas. By the way, in the southwest part of the country, New Mexico, Arkansas, Texas, Israel has a gas company now. They've been buying up 7-Eleven stores and turning those into gas stations owned by an Israeli corporation. And people need to pay attention to that, especially in the southwest part of the country. There's a real effort on Israel's part to get into the gasoline station, convenience store market. And they're moving into the southwest first, where they've really consolidated. We saw this. They were all over the place. And people need to be aware of that.
Geez, 5 years ago, when I still had an automobile there in the state of Maine, I was paying a little over $2 and something for gas. Now you're saying it's $3.60 or something. I couldn't afford to have my automobile living in Maine. And without a car, you're basically land-based. You're grounded. It's a rural state. There's no public transportation that gets you from one city to the other. What about in the grocery stores? Are you noticing any increases in prices there?
Oh yeah, man. You know, my guideline, my go-to guideline on grocery store inflation is a can of beans. I eat a lot of beans, and a can of beans used to be 89 cents, 99 cents. Now they're about a can. So that tells you something. That's in the last year and a half or so. So that gives you a good sense of how things are. I went in the grocery store the other day and spent $60 and didn't even fill up one bag. I mean, it's crazy. And so
Bruce,
people are going to start going hungry.
yeah, do you think this is the case for everybody in the United States across all 50 states? Do you think they're all beginning to feel it?
Oh yeah, yeah. But you know, some people, the wealthier people, it's no big deal for them. But for poor people, what they're doing is they're maximizing their credit card. They're maxing out on it because they don't have the cash to pay for the gas. They don't have the cash to pay for their food, and so they use their credit card. And now they have debt. It's like the U.S. being $35 trillion in debt as a nation. The people have massive debt, and it's going to take them. They're never going to be able to pay it off.
No.
How are they going to pay it off? They probably make the minimum payment every month, $25, $30 a month, and but how else are they going to pay for it? It's
Yeah,
impossible.
and the interest every month that they're paying. I mean, and it's going to kill them. I mean, it is terrible. Not only is the country debt ridden, almost every single ordinary American, even the middle class and above middle class, are getting crucified with debt.
Yeah.
All right, I want to move on to another subject. Before I do, I am predicting. I know I shouldn't say predicting. I am expecting this economic collapse to happen sometime this year, and it'll be across the Western world, United States, all of Europe, Japan, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand, all of those people that are capitalists and have bought into that system. And as you mentioned, the de-dollarization effort is going at warp speed. Bruce, I don't see how this economy can last beyond this year. Your thoughts? Do you think it's imminent?
Well, you know, I've never been into listening to economists, but in the last year, I've been listening to a lot of them. And there's one that I highly recommend. I put her on my blog frequently. Her name is Lena Petrova, Petrova, Lena, Lena. She's really good. And she's very simple. She makes everything very clear. She lives in the United States. I think she's must be a Russian ethnic. She has an accent. Her name sounds Russian. But anyway, she is really good. And she brings on people that, don't talk in wild economic theories that you don't understand. So I've learned a lot from her, and I listen to her regularly now. And all these economic, experts, these are people that have been working in hedge funds and Wall Street and all this. They got these long histories. They're all saying we're going to collapse. Now, when she asks them when, just as you just asked me, they say, I don't know, but it's coming. And it might be sooner than we realize. So that's all I can say to you. But check out Lena Petrova. She's quite excellent, and she's going to help you get a better grip on what's going on.
Yeah, there's her Telegram channel. I just put up there. I subscribe to it. You don't have a possibility of commenting on it, but she is, as you mentioned, very simple, very clear, and she's on just about every day. All right. I want to transition on to something that you are a qualified expert on, and that is the space race. Um, Before we get into it, I'm going to put your blog here, and I'll put it up several times. There's your that's what your blog. It's your web page, which I encourage people to visit, and they can find your blog very easily there. Um, Bruce, not a lot of talk about what's going on with the space race because everything that's taken up the news of late has been the war in Ukraine, the genocide in Israel, and the US pivoting to China and sending Taiwan several $1 million to upgrade their military. What's happening in terms of the space race, and especially in terms of militarization of space?
Well, I think the most important thing is, again, going back to the fact that U.S. is in massive debt. Its goal has long been to control space, knowing that the high ground gives you an advantage in warfare. And whoever controls space then has a much easier time controlling the earth below. And in the case of the US, controlling it on behalf of who? Wall Street, military industrial complex, et cetera, et cetera. So it's so expensive, the US can't afford to pay for it itself. So now Washington is going around the world to its allies in Europe, NATO, in Asia, Japan, we're talking South Korea, Australia, New Zealand, getting them to come into the US space program, having them help pay for the architecture to create this space warfare system, but with the US in charge of the tip of the spear. They just help pay for it. They get a few dollars. They get a few aerospace corporations in their country doing some work. So they get a few jobs, but the US will be in charge of the entire operation. Now, the recent biggest story, though, is the Iran retaliation against Israel after Israel bombed and killed Iranian leadership inside of their embassy in Syria. After that was done, Iran retaliated. And so the United States rushed warships, Navy Aegis destroyers, outfitting with so-called missile defense systems, the shield to be used to take out any kind of attack coming at Israel. The US has deployed Patriot missile defense systems and THAAD, THAAD stands for Theater High Altitude Area Defense, another missile defense system. They've deployed those, Patriot and THAAD, in and around Israel. US sent in warplanes to help shoot down drones that were sent as a first response by Iran. And then the Israel's missile defense system, Iron Dome and Arrow. So all these various missile defense systems, supposedly the best in the world, set up to protect Israel from this attack by Iran. First, they sent these slow-moving drones, and a lot of these missile defense systems costing millions of dollars per shot, all right, were used. And they knocked out most of these drones, okay? And the airplanes were doing the same thing. These drones cost a few $10,000 by Iran. And then Iran sent slow-moving, older generation cruise missiles. And then these missile defense systems protecting Israel were used, and they shot most of those down too. And then Iran sent in ballistic missiles. 9 of them reached a primary airfield for Israel, one of their Air Force bases, where the attacks on this Iranian consulate in Syria, in Damascus, were directed from. And 9 of these missiles from Iran got through. Now, why did they get through? Number one, because the missile defense systems, the Patriot, the THAAD, the Aegis on the ships, the Iron Dome, the Arrow, they were utilized so much that they were running out of missiles to launch to take out any incoming. In addition, though, they turned out not to be as good as were expected, in spite of the fact that U.S. had one of its major radar systems planted down there in the area in Israel to help direct this whole and coordinate this whole attack. So what this did, Iran exposed the U.S.'s so-called missile defense system. It is now being constructed amongst the allies surrounding China, all right? Japan, Okinawa, Guam, South Korea, and several other places in the Asia Pacific. They're all getting these same radars, the same missile defense systems, both on land and on Navy Aegis destroyers. And so what this is now shown is that the U.S. so-called perfect umbrella isn't going to work against the newer technologies. And as Russia and China, North Korea, Iran has developed hypersonic weapons that are able to evade these various missile defense systems, especially after you have an initial attack of drones that are essentially acting as decoys, taking out a lot of their system, using up a lot of their missile defense weapons. And then you send in the hypersonics that can evade things. They have no way of protecting themselves against a real attack, a counterattack. Russia and China have repeatedly said they will never launch a first strike. That's something the U.S. refuses. Israel obviously refuses to also renounce first strike. But they've said that if you hit us, we will hit you back. And we will hit you back in a way you can't defend. And the U.S. says, we've got our missile defense system. Don't worry about it. Well, now Iran has exposed that missile defense system as being extremely vulnerable. And this is a whole new world when it comes to modern warfare fighting.
Okay, Bruce, before we go, I want to direct people again to your website briefly, and there it is, spaceforpeace.org. Tell us about the website. What kind of information can people find there? And then briefly something about the global network, which is global indeed.
Well, we created the global network in 1992. That's 32 years ago. At the time, I was working for the Florida Coalition for Peace and Justice. We were doing a lot of space work because of the U.S. space program located there at Cape Canaveral. It's a dual-use space program, both civilian and military, all at the same time. And we, along with friends in Colorado and a journalism professor, Carl Grossman, met to create the global network. And what we discovered was all over the world, as U.S. satellites orbit the Earth, there are down stations, receiving stations that talk to the satellites as the satellites orbit the Earth. The U.S. has put these downlink stations all over the planet. And we discovered there were peace groups in these communities around the world that said, we don't want our country to be used as a base for Star Wars. And so I began traveling, and other of our leaders did too, around to these places, and they became the members of the global network. And so we continue to work with these organizations in these places around the planet. One of the most important things about our website is in the menu. If you go there, look for a resource section, in the menu, and you'll find our newsletter, and you'll find videos. Every month, we pay an Iraq and Afghanistan war veteran, we pay him to make us a space video every month on a different aspect of the whole space issue. They're not very long, but they're very good. And we put them on our website, and we also put them on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel where we put them as well. So check out our videos and help share them so other people begin to learn more about the nuances of the space issue that is really so important today when it comes to modern warfare fighting.
Okay, so what other kinds of information can people find there? Because you've got information that goes back decades. You've been 30 years, you've been at this. What other kinds of information can they find there? Technical information, what have you?
Well, all kinds of articles on absolutely every different aspect of space issues. So we have a huge library of articles and other resources. You know, we work on nuclear power in space. The nuclear industry views space as a new market. They want to have nuclear-powered mining colonies on the moon and Mars and other planetary bodies. They want to have nuclear-powered rockets. So, you know, all of that stuff, whether it's weapons in space or nuclear power in space, and a long history of our opposition to this is also loaded onto our website as well. Also,
okay.
I also have a blog where every day I report on things I'm doing and the issues I'm concerned about. It's called Organizing Notes. I hope you'll put a link to that in the description of this video. Organizing Notes. And the address of that is space4peace.blogspot.com.
Yeah, it's running across this live stream right now. I've been running your website and your blogspot right now so people can find it. One more thing about the website. You publish both in print and online what is it, quarterly newspaper now?
No, actually, we only do it once or twice a year anymore. It's called Space Alert. It's now being laid out. The latest version is being laid out at this very moment. We'll go to the printer in the next week, and then we'll post it on the website, and we'll also send copies of it to our donors in the United States and to our member groups across the world. So, but it's very expensive anymore to print and mail. The mailing costs, you want to talk about inflation, the mailing costs have gone up so high that we're only doing the newsletter once or twice a year. But that's why the importance of the website and the blog help pick up some of that slack.
So 2 questions and then we'll finish. How can people contact you? Can they contact you through the website?
Yep, they can contact me through the website, or they can send me an email at globalnet, GLOBALNET at mindspring.com. Or they can go to my blog, or they can go to our Facebook page or my Facebook page and talk to me there.
And how can people contribute, Bruce, if they want to contribute to the global network? Because you survive on contributions from your members and from others who are not members. How can people do that?
We don't get any grants. We don't get any government money. All of our money comes from small donations. I only make $1,000 a month as a stipend. The office is in my house, the electricity, the internet, all that is covered by this stipend, and that's all that I get. We depend on people donating. You can donate from our website. We have a donate now page there on our website at space4peace.org, and or you can send a check to the Global Network. Our address is on our website.
Okay, Bruce. Well, thank you for that. Thank you for, wow, a very riveting and important conversation about what's happening in Israel, what's happening in the United States, uh, about the economy in the United States. And my feeling has been that if there's any hope short of a nuclear Armageddon, that if the United States economy does collapse, similar to what happened in the Soviet Union, all of its tools, its military, its bases, uh, the leverage they've used the dollar for, the sanctions, everything the United States has used will collapse. And I'm not sure that a phoenix will rise from the ashes, so to speak, like Vladimir Putin rose from the ashes of the collapse of the Soviet Union. I think we can only hope for that. I think it's the only hope for humanity that somehow or other the United States, the head of the snake, the Zionists who control it, is weakened and decapitated.
Well, we have terrible leadership here right now, so I don't see us having any savior in this country. If we have a savior, it's going to be people like those students out there protesting and getting arrested at colleges across America today, and people our age that are supporting them. Those are our saviors, all of us who are doing the work today that needs to be done. We can't rely on a hero to come save us. We're not going to get one in the United States.